Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we are here for a review. Dalton, tell them what we're reviewing.
This is our read-along for the month of August, and we are finally finishing up the review of The Call of the Wild by Jack London. And apparently I can't talk today. That was just...
The most popular book we've ever read.
Yeah, this has just gone over well. I mean, people have just come in leaps and bounds to hear about The Call of the Wild.
Yeah, no one likes this, apparently.
Hey, I can't say I was crazy about it, but, like, I don't know, it seems like it's a pretty...
It's a standard text.
It is. It's a classic. But, yeah, whatever. Okay. What do we know? Good things, bad things?
Okay, so we've got... So What Happened, 3 good things, 3 bad things, quotes, literary analysis, rating and recommendation based on the text. So, Dalton, can you tell us a little bit about what happened in the novel?
What happened in the novel? We go with Buck. Buck is a dog. He was a house pet. Buck basically gets stolen and sold off into essentially slavery. He is sent out to the Alaskan wild where he learns to be a sled dog. And through a series of multiple owners, he learns a lot about himself, becomes the greatest sled dog ever known, and then finally meets the right master who supports him.
Finally meets the right man.
Meets the right man. What's that chapter called again?
For the Love of a Man.
For the Love of a Man. He meets the right man, and they, wander off into the sunset together, and he dies. And the man dies. And Buck basically just shuffles off into his own legend and becomes basically the ghost of the Alaskan tundra.
Yeah.
A legend in his own.
So, 3 good things. What have you got?
I really hope somebody takes like my quick breakdown off the top of my head, like writes it as like their plot summary for their book assignment, and the teacher can be like, "What the hell is this?"
Book report.
Not close. 3 good things. This is the classic hero's journey from start to finish. Absolutely so. That's a terrifying smirk. I think you're disagreeing. Number 2, London was able to make the reader identify with and understand an animal without doing any over-the-top anthropomorphism, things like that. You really can identify with the character. And number 3, this story creates characters that are rich and memorable. But that's going to go with one of my bad things as well.
It's terrifying to me that a lot of our commentary is starting to blend together.
Is it?
Number 1, this is the hero's journey, plain and simple.
Are we just done here?
Number 2, tough to write a book where your protagonist doesn't get a word of dialogue. But, number 3, how do you feel? Jack London doesn't give a damn.
Okay.
I think that's a good thing.
A little bit of difference here. That is absolutely terrifying, though. I think we've done this long enough. We're just starting to identify everything in buckets together.
We're just picking the same things out.
And wholeheartedly, we don't prep this. I mean, we prep this on our own, but like we have no idea what we're saying until we're sitting down to film.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe we'll have to start going over
Maybe we're like, hey, you can't talk about this. This is my point this week. 3 bad things. The writing in this is very simple, and it feels like it's almost geared towards a younger reader. That's a little off-putting for me. And like I don't know, I didn't get that the first time I read it through, but this time I'm like, Call of the Wild. It could be the fact that I have nice little drawings throughout my book that make me feel like I'm reading a children's book the entire time. Yeah. Lovely, though, aren't they?
So while you were reading it, did you do the turn?
The turn?
Yeah.
What do you mean the turn?
I mean, so you'd get in your chapter, whose turn it was to run towed behind the sled.
Actually, no. I've been reading this on and off in public, so I'm like, oh, shit. He's not reading a children's book. Anyway, number 2.
That's how I feel toting Harry Potter around.
Yeah. There is a lot of action throughout this piece, not a lot of movement. A lot of things that are happening get us nowhere. And finally, to counter my final good point, sometimes that the characters in this and the concepts in this, they're introduced, and the characters are wonderful, but it's never capitalized on. They're just gone.
Yeah.
Anyway.
There's a long bit right at the end, which gives us a thorough physical description of Buck.
Okay.
It's at the end.
Okay.
We get that at the beginning. Why are we getting it at the end as well? We've read the entire piece with Buck as something in our mind.
Yeah, who cares what he looks like at the end?
Yeah. 2, at the end of the day, you're reading a book about a dog. And 3, I think there is a stigma about this being children's literature.
Okay. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Which is very interesting, because I have never read this in a class. I've taken some classes geared towards adolescent literature, children's literature. This is never brought up. We did read this for a class, and I can't remember exactly what it was, though. I think it was pop fiction, maybe?
I think you're right.
But I don't know. Once you actually get through this, you realize it is so simple. It is very much children's literature, in my opinion.
Okay.
Okay. Where would you like to start with this?
Well, we got quotes first.
Yeah, lay a quote on me.
I've got this from page 8. No lazy, sun-kissed life was this, with nothing to do but loaf and be bored.
Sounds glorious.
Yeah. And from 24, Buck stood and looked on, the successful champion, the dominant primordial beast, who had made his kill and found it good.
It's a good line. That dominant primordial beast always seems to come back through. It's a good line.
Yeah.
From 60 of my text, far more potent were the memories of his heredity that gave things he had never seen before a seeming familiarity. The instincts, which were but memories of his ancestors, became habits, which he lapsed in later days, and still later, in him, quickened and become alive again. And a bit of a long one from 122 towards the end. There is a patience of the wild, dog tireless, persistent as life itself, that holds motionless for endless hours the spider in its web, the snake in its coils, the panther in its... I've lost my place. Excuse me. I can't read today. This patient belongs peculiarly to life when it hunts its living food, and it belonged to Buck as he clanged to the flanks of the herd.
Now, from time to time, Dalton will make up a word on the show. Normally, he does not make up a word while he is reading it.
Yeah.
Peculiarly? What is
Well, I don't know what I was going on there. You ever just like lose your place in the text and like you just shift automatically like, oh, up, back here. Let's just not talk about that quote. Let's just move on with life. Wow. Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right.
Let's talk about things. Where do you want to start?
So I think an interesting place to start here is with the observation that this is 5 acts.
Okay.
This is not a 3-part story. This is a 5-part story.
Okay.
1, exposition, life on the farm. 2, captivity, which is the complications. 3, work, which is the climax. 4, the love of a man, which is falling action. And the 5th part is the catastrophe/resolution, which is the wild.
Okay.
And that plays into my main thinking for the thrust of this novel. But do you have anything you'd like to talk about as well?
I've got a few things I'd like to talk about with the hero's journey and the idea of the birth of a legend, because we did talk about that a bit in our last week's review of this.
But we can talk about it again because no one saw it.
Absolutely so. Absolutely so. But please, go on. Get started.
I wonder if this is a metaphor for alcoholism.
Okay.
Do you have any alcoholism in your family?
No, we don't believe in alcoholism. They're just all undiagnosed alcoholics.
Oh, okay. So
yeah, nobody goes to treatment.
So but you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
So with an alcoholic, I guess one of the tests is you take 3 shots worth of alcohol and you measure the pulse rate. And if you're not an alcoholic, I guess, and this, I don't know if this is a crackpot theory test or if this is something that's genuine and out there. I've just heard about it a couple times. After that consumption of alcohol, you take the pulse rate. If the pulse rate drops, you're probably not an alcoholic because alcohol is supposed to make you tired. Alcohol is supposed to make you tired, right?
Okay.
It's a depressant. But if your pulse rate rises and you get anxious and ready to go, man, that has triggered the alcoholic mechanism by which you become excited from alcohol and it leads into it, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
We're going to have to put this to the test, I think.
Yeah, so when you're on the farm, you're as happy as you know to be.
Okay.
That's where we start. Perhaps real work hasn't soured you to life's prospects.
Okay.
So you are a babe in the woods. You're just there. You're existing. You enter the work world, the adult world, etc. This is the captivity in the novel, where you learn of the thing inside. Right?
Okay.
Maybe at the end of the day, you just got to have a drink because work ruined you for the day. So you learn of that thing inside. In the novel, that thing inside was beaten into him, right?
Okay.
And then the viciousness came out. That thing is beaten into you / out of you. It is something that sort of happens at the same time, right? Okay. You were beaten down, the beast comes out. Then there's the work. I mean, real work. And when you give into it enough to perform at your best, you're the hardest working dog anyone has ever seen, right? Boy, that guy just shows up and he gets to work. And how often have you ever worked with one of those, like a functional alcoholic?
Yes.
They're hard-working people, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, they kick ass at work.
And you can smell the vodka through their pores,
Yep.
right? It's insane.
It's ironic that you said vodka because the person I'm thinking of, spot on.
Yeah. And when you give it, well, and so not to get too into those details, vodka's very cheap.
It is.
If you get bottom shelf vodka, that's the cheapest liquor you're getting off that bottom shelf.
Yep.
Whiskey's not going to be cheaper than that, right? So when you get into that situation, if you give in too much, you kill spits, right?
Okay.
And you end up getting in trouble. If you give in too much to the beast, you end up derailing things.
Yeah, things go awry.
I'm trying to find in real life. Maybe this is you drank too much and you missed your alarm.
Okay.
Right? Spitz was the guy that kept you in line, kept you in line, kept you in line.
Kept you going.
That alarm wakes you up at the right time. You drink too much and you miss it. It's gone.
Okay.
And you get in trouble for it. So you have to be the leader to yourself, don't you? And wake up with that alarm. Mm-hmm. When you kill Spitz, it's one way or the other.
That safety net's gone.
That safety net's gone. So you got to be the leader, or you're going to give into it.
Okay.
Then, once you've assumed that position, maybe you wrangle it in, and you find the man you really are, right? Perhaps for a lot of people, this is a creative self.
Okay.
This is how you find your creativity. This is how you spark it when you need it sparked. And you are able then to keep those things separate. The function and the alcohol.
Okay.
You allow the alcohol to fill the world the alcohol has to fill.
Okay.
For you. Which is really sort of a perturbing thing to say, right?
It is.
But for some people, it happens that way. And one of those worlds does not disturb the other, and really they sort of help the other exist because you have to have that release valve, right? So if this is something, I don't want to ever make it sound like alcoholism is a good thing.
Okay.
But turning to the drink helps some people not lash out at work. Helps some people not be the guy who's constantly on edge.
Okay.
Things like that. And maybe in this drunken state, once in a while, you bet on yourself. Hemingway said to always do sober what you promised drunk, and that will teach you to keep your mouth shut. But sometimes you'll bet on yourself and you'll pull it off. And you'll pull that 1,000-pound sled, won't you?
Okay.
You'll get it started and become a legend. You'll get drunk and write your way through Call of the Wild. But it will not last. You will hear that call a little too loud when it is not okay. And it will stay that, and you will stay out just a little while longer, and a little while longer, until a little while longer becomes a little too long.
Okay.
You'll be out there after some elusive game, won't you? Some other legend-making proposition. And when you try to come back, the man that used to be will be there no more.
Interesting.
Right? In the novel, that is the man, the man of Buck's life.
Yeah, returns to camp and finds him dead.
Finds him dead. Now, if Buck is a metaphor for alcoholism, when you try to reel it back in because you've been out too long,
Yeah.
the you that should be there is no longer going to be there.
True.
So that is the extended metaphor that I kind of get from this novel.
Okay.
This work.
That is an interesting thing to bring up, though, because I think there's a lot of good dynamics here, and it's kind of hard to identify which dynamic you want to read this in. If you want to, the classic, man versus man scenarios, man versus self, man versus nature. However you want to take this here, is this buck versus man against the other man in red? Is this buck versus Spitz, buck versus himself, buck versus nature? In that aspect, this is very classic man versus self.
Right.
And I think that brings a very interesting light into the reading if you want to go it that way. Now, I don't know enough about Jack London to speak about Jack London. Do you know anything about him?
A little bit.
I would assume, because this is obviously an adventuring man, because this is what he wrote about, and there's two types of people who do that. One, the person who did it out of necessity and is going to be drunk every night because, damn, that's a life. Or two, the guy who is just so devoted to this life he doesn't care. He's just in it. This is his passion. So I do think that is a very interesting idea, having this being about alcoholism. I think it would merit reading a little bit more about Jack London.
I'm 99% positive Jack London was absolutely an alcoholic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I think that's how he died.
Okay.
Not sure.
I'm sure there will be somebody in the comments down below who will let us know a little bit more about Jack London. There always is.
Yell at us.
Absolutely.
After their quick Wikipedia search.
Yes, yes. We should look into Wikipedia more often. It's a tool. But that is a good idea here, is how do you want to take this text? Because if we want to go that man versus self idea, where that man would be Buck in this, that is that internal struggle with oneself and coming to terms with oneself. And that could be the idea of the alcohol. Pushing yourself to the limits of that, trying to keep that functioning life together, holding it together, until the point you can't. Because there's always a point where you can't hold it all together.
And you lose it to the wild.
You do lose it to the wild. And at which point, what do you do after that? Because that is very interesting. Buck's choice at that end is basically he just packs his bags and moves on. He goes out into the wild and immerses himself completely.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, I mean, that would be a very typical idea when the alcoholic goes home to find the home gone. It's time to hit the road, man. Give me that bottle and just dive headfirst into that. Very interesting there.
To where that's all you have.
Yeah, absolutely. That becomes your life.
The
That's
wild
what
is
you
all
know.
have. Yeah.
And that is the interesting part here, is that idea of the wild to me. There is always that primordial urge to return to the wild. This is why today, we leave air conditioning still to go sleep in a tent on the weekends. It's that drive to go back to nature. And I think that's a lot what London was trying to capture in this, is that drive that's in everyone to return back to that basic primordial urge. Now, granted, we're never going to do it to Buck's extreme, for sure. But it is lingering there, and that does give you a little bit of a spark to kind of move you through this novel, because you do identify with that character.
Yeah.
Although that character is an animal that you're never going to hear speak.
Yeah.
From a writing standpoint, though, I think that's brilliant. I think Jack London did an amazing job with that. Because I can tell you about Buck, and I can tell you how Buck feels and what Buck's doing, but Buck's a dog.
Yeah.
There is no over-the-top Animal Farm here. This is just the story about a dog told through the dog's perspective.
Yeah.
But you identify with that, and that's very interesting. It's very well done, in my opinion.
It is well done.
Okay.
And it had to have been very difficult to do.
I would agree.
I can't imagine writing an entire story without any dialogue and communicating what your protagonist is feeling. Or thinking we get the inside thoughts, but to see the progression of those thoughts into feelings, into actions, is pretty masterful. I mean, it
is.
It's something that is not easy to do. It's something that is not easy to pull off, but it's pulled off here.
On top of that as well, we mentioned a little bit how this writing is so simple it almost feels like children's literature. The man's not using a lot of big flourishes, a lot of big language, things like that, to achieve that goal. This is very simple. Anybody could pick this up and read it and know what's going on.
Well, you've got to be fairly familiar with the language to understand the word peculiarly.
Peculiarly. I know, reading is hard today. But I do think it's interesting that in that simple language, he was able to achieve that goal, to communicate through Buck without using Buck's speaking. I would agree with you. It is masterful. That would be a very difficult task to do.
And I wonder if that simple language is part of the reason that we never really call into question the fact that this is a dog, right?
Okay.
It is a very simply communicated language that allows us into the world without too much cerebral nature to our reading.
Okay.
The cerebral stuff is us looking into things. But the cerebral nature of us looking into things is very much like a dog trying to figure out the world, right? Without words.
Yeah.
So it's a good turn to then say, I don't think I'm going to say it that way. It is easier to pass it off that way than if there were a lot of ornate language that we would then have to be questioning the fact that our protagonist is a dog.
Okay.
Right? If we had gotten a whole bunch of fancy language and woe is me type stuff, then you question, this is coming from a dog? I'm
Okay.
reading a book about a dog.
That's fair.
Is this really written for me?
But
You
it
see what I'm
is
saying?
interesting while you're reading this, you do know Buck is a dog and you're fine with that, but when you're reading it, it's not the first thought that's in your mind. Because he reads like a very well-written character. It's very believable.
And I think part of it is that it's not first person.
Okay.
It is third person.
Okay.
So we are still allowed to observe that protagonist without having to identify.
Okay.
Without having to identify through the language, right? Because we are never prompted to question, does a dog really have these thoughts?
All right.
Does a dog really observe these things?
All right. Well, I do think if we can move on to something here, one of the points that we both agreed on here, if you are looking for a good example of the hero's journey, this is just about spot on.
Yeah.
The hero's journey, if you're not familiar, it's a pretty simple process here. And we're going to go Star Wars. Everybody knows Star Wars because Star Wars does great with the hero's journey. You got a young Luke Skywalker, right? Doesn't quite know about himself, not really sure what's going on, but he begins to grow. He finds that mentor, that call, gives him some new options in life. He's learning some new things, but in that he must fail at some point. We go back and Aunt Beru's whole farm's been burnt down.
Yeah.
At that point, there's nothing left. Buck cannot go home. He's been ostracized. He's out. Did I say ostracized right? I mean,
No,
you gave me that
did
look.
not.
Like, yeah, I'm wow.
There we go.
It's a rough day. What do we
Joseph
got here?
Campbell.
What do we got
Hero
here?
with 1,000 Faces.
Okay.
If you want to talk about the hero's journey, that's where you're getting it from.
That's
Joseph
the one?
Campbell.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're moving on with this. He must first fail, then he begins to succeed. He has to lose that mentor along the way. Obi-Wan gets struck down. And through that, he can become his true self. He can move on and finish that hero's journey. He is the hero now. This is a prime example with Buck here.
Yeah.
This is a great example of the hero's journey. Do you want to talk a little bit about Joseph Campbell? I feel like you pulled that with a purpose.
There is something interesting to be said about Joseph Campbell. As I understand it, he got to, I think, 25 years old.
Okay.
And decided, I'm not doing anything with my life. On a trip, while he was, I think, on a cruise or something like that.
Okay.
Then he decided, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break my day into 4-hour segments of reading and writing. I will do 4 hours of reading. I will do 4 hours of writing. I will do 4 hours of reading. I will do 4 hours of writing.
Okay.
And that is how he lived his life for a good little while and became the forefront expert on the hero's journey. He not invented, but diagnosed, I would say, the hero's journey through so many forms of literature. And it's just an interesting thing to do with your life. To decide I'm going nowhere, I'm doing nothing. Let me try this out.
Well, yeah. You gotta try something new.
Yeah, I hate to throw that out there in the middle of a review, but
Well, that's fair. It all ties together, for sure. But we did talk about this a little bit last week. In addition to this hero's journey here, we kind of get an extra portion of it here, where the hero becomes legend. And it's not something that you normally see, and it's very interesting to actually read. Because normally a story would either start with the legend, or end with the beginning of the legend. We actually don't see that played out. This is the only instance I can ever think of. I've read something like that where the legend actually develops as the story develops as well. So that is a very unique opportunity with this book that is very unique to this book. I do think it adds quite a bit as well. It's a memorable chapter.
And something else that strikes me as unique along those same lines is this book feels very much as if it starts in retirement.
Okay.
Doesn't it?
It does.
He's
got the lazy, enjoyable life.
Yeah, he's got the lazy, enjoyable life that does not feel young.
Okay.
He doesn't feel young and ignorant. He feels older but naive.
Okay, and I wouldn't say he's billed as being young. He's not a young dog.
Right.
I mean, he's lived his life, and this is the life he lives. So it is kind of interesting because you don't get the young man's hero's journey. This is the old guy who gets thrown into this world and has to survive.
Yeah.
And through that becomes the hero.
And I wonder if part of the function there is because it happens so quickly, it seems.
Okay.
This seems like a 2 or 3 year deal, right?
I would say, yeah.
But we never stop.
Well, when you're looking in the idea, because, again, this is a dog. I mean, at 12 years, that's good life. Yeah. I mean, it has to progress quickly. The life has to go quickly. So it is, again, interesting characterizations you have to not only write in the idea of that this is a dog,
yeah,
but to complete the entirety of a hero's journey in a few short years, because that is pretty much that's his lifespan. What's the word that I'm looking for there? The meat of his lifespan. So it is interesting. It is. And it's not poorly executed in any way, but I can't say it really just struck me as amazing.
Oh, so you forget? Okay.
Yeah, we're segueing here. We're segueing into that rating.
You segued somewhere, and I wasn't quite ready for it.
Okay.
So what did you rate the novel, if you didn't think it was amazing?
Okay. Actually, I'm going to assume I gave this kind of low. I gave it 86 sled dogs out of 100.
I gave this 92 bullies out of 100.
92?
I think that it's not only... Well, first off, I really like the alcoholism interpretation.
It is a good interpretation. It really is.
Second off, it's very well written. Third off, there's some craft things that are pulled off in a very interesting fashion. But also, I think that this is a very good text to show things through.
Okay.
Right? You can point at a lot of things in this text and never get lost.
I don't know if maybe I had just built myself up with this one, or I wanted more from it, because I do remember going through it in college and we enjoyed it. We really connected over this piece. But it just didn't do what I wanted it to do for me. Okay. And now that we've been talking about young readers, you can actually buy this, penguin.com/youngreaders.
Oh, wow.
So it is billed for children at this point.
Well, at this point. Well, I don't know. Would this be billed for today's youngsters with all the violence in it?
Well, it's just inappropriate levels of violence,
Yeah.
dog fights.
Yeah.
It's horrible. Anyway, what would you recommend if you enjoyed Into the Wild?
If you enjoyed this and you enjoy the hero building and you enjoy the return to nature, I would recommend the Nick Adams stories from Hemingway.
Okay. I'm glad you didn't notice there that I said if you would, after you've read Into the Wild, this is the Call of the Wild. But I would highly recommend Into the Wild by John Krakauer. It's a nonfiction story. I've talked about it a lot on this channel. I love it. It's about a young man going into the Alaskan wilderness to make it on his own, and not as successful as Buck was.
Right.
Not so much. Not so much.
Yeah.
Anyway, you want to end us out here, Adrian?
So that is what we have for a review of The Call of the Wild. If you like this sort of thing and want to see more, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you've not already, and if you would like to help us make more content here on Strip Cover Lit, there's a link, as always, to our Patreon to be found in the description below.
All right. Holy shit.
What?
I can't fucking read.
Oh.
Good?
Yeah.
Just excited to go to the non-trad, students' lounge with my backpack on wheels.
Yeah, say your wheel around back there.
I'm really excited about it. All right.